I'm Dr. Corey Probst, Wellness Director and Vice President of the Diet Doc. Welcome to the Diet Doc Life Mastery Podcast. I'm here today with my partner, Dr. Joe Klemczewski, founder of the Diet Doc, and we're in our science and fiction segment today. Joe, I have had lots of questions lately, and I know you have too, about hormones and whether there are certain things we can do dietarily to change our hormonal profile and what may help and what may not. Sounds like we're going to dig into some interesting discussion on that today.
Yeah, this is a question that comes up all of the time, and its proponents are people who love ketogenic diets and paleo. So what tends to happen, people are looking for reasons to go one way or the other. You know, it always comes back to low carbs or low fat. And if you look at a lot of the information, especially by bloggers in whatever realm of health you want to look, they all latch on to the same quasi-scientific jargon, which is simply that, yes, you need fat to increase testosterone because that's where it comes from. It's a cholesterol-derived hormone. Mm-hmm. But that is almost completely antithetical to the research, which I want to go over today. And it's very interesting. I mentioned this a few podcasts ago in how discouraging it can be that when you just look things up online, mm-hmm. it's very often the case that the same writers or bloggers looking for catchy, buzzword titles will just cite the same studies over and over and over and over, even if it's misapplied. So it was interesting. I did see the same citation in many, many articles, and they all use the same headline that fat intake would make if you decrease your fat intake, it would make your testosterone plummet. That was the word, plummet, everywhere I looked. And,
okay.
And again, that particular study was completely invalid because here's what it showed. It was one of those things, in research, Corey, how you can make something graphically with pie charts or linear XY axis charts look however you want. So if something has a tiny margin of difference, you just scale that thing up so high that it looks like Mount Everest comparatively.
Well, I'm laughing because, I could know nothing about this topic, but just seeing the headline itself and the title makes me skeptical because it's sensational.
Right.
So, yeah, I completely understand. So what are we seeing in the research? What is actually true?
in this one study, which of course was very short term and, hand selected a few subjects, they showed an 8.5% acute decrease in testosterone. What they didn't show is that later on that came back up. So I just want to say, first of all, right away, that, looking at all of the research out there, looking at many, many medical journals and longer term studies up to a year, I think we have some pretty conclusive information we can go over.
Okay.
So are you ready?
Yeah, totally. I have a quick question.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Are we going to talk about gender differences and male, female, and testosterone and why that's important and how diet can affect levels?
Okay. So let's start there.
Okay.
There aren't many gender differences, but it comes almost in terms of quantity. So let's look at some of the markers first of all, because I think this is important for people to know. Because, like you said, sensational information or headlines really get people worried. So the average male, if you look at somebody in my category, the average male would need somewhere between 400 and maybe 900 or 300 and 900 nanograms per deciliter. So that's normal. So let's just pick that midline. Let's say the average guy at an average age is about 600 nanograms per deciliter. And that helps us to, of course, not be depressed. We have more energy. We're not just laying in bed all day. Our metabolisms can function fine. Libido is normal. Guess what the correlational amount is for women? To also have all of those things, for you to function normally and all that stuff, the average woman is about 10 to 15.
10 to 15.
Period. period.
Period.
Right? So here's why this is funny, because guys think, and I'm guilty of this. I've had my hormone panel taken before, and I'm like, well, shit, if I'm down here, like I want to be like a 16-year-old level.
Right.
And physicians will say, look, you're right at the midline. You're exactly in the middle at 500 or 600. I'm like, yeah, but I want to be at the top, because then I'll have, faster metabolism. I'll be able to maintain more lean body mass. And they say, forget it, punk, because as soon as you start supplementing, you increase your risk of heart disease dramatically. You increase your risk of prostate cancer dramatically, your risk of anxiety and insomnia. Excuse me.
And you hear about that happening all the time.
Right, but
I do, at least men in their 40s and older, as they feel like they're aging and getting more tired and losing muscle, supplementing with that.
And I'm not going to say I have not looked into that, because again,
yeah,
Joe does not like average, and so I have.
Back when you said, so a guy like me, an average Joe, and I'm like, you actually think you're average, dude?
Well, I have friends who go to anti-aging doctors, and they get injections, and I know, like, they've brought their levels back up to 1,000 or so nanograms per deciliter, and they say, I feel great, I feel amazing, and all this stuff. But you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month, and getting an injection in your ass every single week for the rest of your life, just to go up marginally to that top level. And as I'm saying, women do just fine on 10 times, 100 times less than men. So that's why and I've known men, because of prostate problems, testicular cancer, things like that, who have gone under 100, or even one guy went all the way down to like 12, I think, as a client. And just by getting that replacement testosterone, just without even training, just put on 15 pounds of lean body mass, went back up to a normal level, because he truly needed that. His body was producing none.
So was this a person who was dieting really stringently and had very, very low body fat levels, or?
It was a cancer issue, testicular cancer, I can think. So let's get into some of the actual research. Here's what's interesting. We know genetics are always the foundational element of everything, even your hormone levels. So I've talked about this before, how my overall total cholesterol and LDLs are just rock bottom. I have been tested before at unreadable levels of total cholesterol, under 100. And that means my HDLs are typically lower. Of course, LDLs are going to be lower. And so my testosterone should be average or below, because your body just doesn't need that much. And so I could decide, okay, well, maybe I need to do something to increase my testosterone. The number one thing you can do to increase your testosterone is to train aggressively, get some weight training, give a stimulus to your body to actually add lean body mass. That's the number one thing you can do.
Is it resistance training, Joe, or is it other types of training as well?
Any type of training will do it, but if you get into long distance endurance stuff, then you start to go the other direction. Then you can start to overtrain, hit your immune system too hard, and then you're going the opposite direction.
So I wonder if my testosterone is like minus 15.
You should get that checked. You should get a panel done. First time I ever had mine tested was probably 5 or so years ago. I had never done that before. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. I don't know why I haven't had this tested before.
And that's it's a panel they can run when you get a blood test done.
Absolutely. Next time you do a physical.
Yeah.
So besides genetics and training exercise, the other thing is total body composition and your total calorie intake. So this is what's really interesting. One study showed that between vegans eating a certain amount of fat and meat eaters eating a certain amount of fat, and they did some manipulation there, they showed that the more meat you eat and the more saturated fats you eat, your testosterone actually went down. Now think how, again, just is a almost non sequitur that is for most people. They think, oh, if I just eat a cow a day. Forget the cow, I'll go eat a tiger. And as long as I have that red meat in my body, my testosterone will go up. Every study I looked at showed that the more saturated fat you eat, the more your testosterone goes down.
Interesting.
Should have brought some water in here.
Okay.
So
you're so upset about your testosterone levels, Joe.
I know, I'm getting too excited here. So the other thing that they looked at, one of the longer term studies I looked at, spent over a year studying 209 healthy male participants.
Mm-hmm.
And this was actually in the Asian Journal of Andrology. Another study I looked at was in the Journal of Steroid Biochemistry.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what they showed. Monosaturated fat, if you're doing an isocaloric review, so whatever changes you're making, you're pushing carbs up, fat down, or vice versa, or you're adding more saturated fat versus unsaturated, but as long as calories stayed the same, again, what the longest study I saw, more fat in general actually made your testosterone go down. More fat made your testosterone go down. More saturated fat made your testosterone go down. But in an isocaloric study, again, if you ate more mono-unsaturated fat, like olive oil, things like that, they showed a slight increase in testosterone. And that was even confirmed by testicular mass and volume. So I thought that might get a laugh,
That is important.
Just like we're just gonna test the mass here, and that's evidence that your testosterone is increasing. But again, it was
about eating your Wheaties, boys.
you got to have that olive oil, the Mediterranean diet. So, overall, one of the things, even as I said, a study in the Journal of Steroid Biochemistry, they looked at different types of profiles, all the way up to 40% of your calories from fat, which is quite a bit. That's almost hard to consume. That would be about 100 grams of fat or more for me, and all the way down to 20 to 25% of calories from fat. And in those ranges, which you would say is pretty low fat to pretty high fat, isocaloric, no change in calories, there was zero change in testosterone. Zero change. So I think the take home with all of this, Corey, and again, I probably get this question every single week. And so it was really fun to dig into some of the current research. The take home is increasing your fat does not increase testosterone. As a matter of fact, it might decrease it. But as a percent of your fat intake, if you get more mono-unsaturated fat, which is good advice anyway for your heart and your brain, then at least you're going to move your testosterone level up, as much as you can within your genetic spectrum. But it really does come down to your body composition is important, your calorie status is important. And this is going to be an interesting thing coming up. I know there are people doing studies on this. Paul Ravella mentioned that he's part of a University of South Florida study of people who are ultra lean. They've just competed in bodybuilding contests, and then they're bringing their food intake and their body composition, fat levels back up, and they're going to be getting these panels, and they're tracking their macronutrients and their calories. Anecdotally, I have seen cases. I've listened to other people talk about their experience competing, and they've taken the time to do hormone panels before, during, at the bottom, whether they're leanest, and back up. And they had some marked decreases, like halved levels of testosterone. And it took just as long to bring those back up as it did to bring them down through the dieting phase. So we know being too lean, overtraining, just exhausting yourself to that level on a controlled starvation plane, that's the way you decrease your testosterone.
Okay. So may I ask you a question?
Yes.
So you're talking about people who are too lean. And yeah. And there are only a very small percentage of people on the planet who are too lean, who are listening to this conversation right now. most people are not too lean. They're working on decreasing body fat. But to those people, if you were going to give them one thing to apply in their lives based on this conversation to get a better understanding of whether they're, at a healthy testosterone range or work on being as healthy as possible, what would you have them do?
Well, first of all, don't worry. Don't get in this.
Yeah.
Don't get in this alarmist state thinking that you're doing something wrong and you're going to crush your hormone panel.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I brought up the fact that that's how you can devastate your hormone levels is by being too lean. It's not to caution you against that. It's just that that's the only place where you really have to worry about it. And
Got it.
And so if you are dieting, first of all, just losing body fat, there's evidence that your testosterone will go up because you're healthier. You're just more efficient at getting those endogenous hormone, receptor signals from your brain to the glands that are producing testosterone. And you're just getting healthier, if you're getting leaner.
Yeah, it's part of that, Joe, because you're picking up the amount of training or resistance training you're doing. And on top of that, you're choosing healthier foods. You probably are gravitating more towards the unsaturated sort of fats and the leaner proteins.
I mean, both. First of all, training is the number one way to increase or elevate your hormone levels to your best. Getting enough rest is second to that. And then just not being in too low of a calorie deficit. And this is one reason why I believe that the higher carb, lower fat studies or diets show more stable, better hormone levels is because you're not starving. I mean, even if you're eating all the fat you want, but your carbs are low, you know how miserable you are. And unfortunately, some of these writers out there and keto proponents say that it doesn't matter how lean you are, it doesn't matter how you're dieting, you need fat in your diet to elevate your testosterone. That is totally wrong.
True.
That is totally the opposite. So, if you bring fat down, your testosterone will go up. If you bring saturated fat up, your testosterone will go down. What you need to do is make sure your calories are sane. So if you're losing weight, trying to get leaner, make sure you're not losing too quickly.
Gradual losses.
Yep. You can't throw carbs out of your diet. You should decrease saturated fat, and you should increase monounsaturated fat like olive oil. And then if you're really worried about this stuff, get a test once in a while. It's very interesting, especially if you're manipulating your diet. If you want to be a good amateur scientist, get these things done every 2 or 3 months and just see how it's affecting you.
Awesome. Awesome advice, Joe. So just to wrap this up, you have said olive oil. I don't use olive oil. A lot of my clients don't use olive oil. They don't want to cook with oil because they can't taste it. It adds fat to their diets that it's not enjoyable for them. So where else might they get monounsaturated fats if they're not using oil?
So you're looking for omega-3s, and so you can use flaxseed oil. I think there are some other things, maybe chia seeds, things like that. Certainly salmon, that's going to be a high amount of fat, but there at least is some omega-3 there. You can supplement with omega-3s. You can get, distilled mercury-free essential fatty acids in capsules, a gram or two there that you have to kind of take a lot to get that. But I would certainly look for a way, first of all, just do a search and see what other ones are out there. I'm sure we're not exhausting the list, but and these are things you don't have to do every day. I hate to see people thinking they're chugging down
fish every day. And
yeah. A lot of studies show that just 1 or 2 servings a week give you a pretty substantial maximum benefit to EFAs.
Great. Awesome. All right.
Thanks for letting me drone on about testosterone, Corey. This is
very enlightening, and thank you, Joe, for sharing that information. Great takeaways for everyone.
All right, I appreciate it.
All right, guys, thanks again for joining us. We will be back soon for the next episode of the Diet Doc Life Mastery Podcast. Thanks for joining us.